things. But boy, when you have the science on your side, and the Shroud of Turin has the science on its side, I mean, I just would say, not only would I not be afraid of it, I'd be reading every single article you can get. And you can get that, you know, from my website, majacenter.com. Just go to that article called Science in the Shroud of Turin. I footnoted everything to every imaginable study and test that's been done, and there's literally been hundreds of them. So you want to do that, you know, first and foremost. Secondly, the other thing that you want to do is very much examine, you know, the crucifixion of Jesus, not just the resurrection and the production of the image. I mean, there's no doubt that the shroud has real blood on it, with real hemoglobin, with a real AB positive blood type, with a real partial DNA profile. I mean, you know, what forger is going to fake a DNA profile? You say, well, they put the blood on it, you know, after the fact and so forth, so they put real blood on it. But you don't put the real blood on it in the way, you know, that a criminologist today, right, you know, who is very aware of forensic science can tell you this is the exact precise way in which the blood would drip. This is the way it would dry. This is where the serum would go. This is how the spangling would work. I mean, honestly, you're not going to get that because the blood produces that drip and that re-warming and then re-adhering to the cloth after a crucifixion. And not only is it after a crucifixion, it's after a very unusual crucifixion of Jesus Christ. In other words, you know, Jesus has a very unusual, you know, very few criminals, if any besides Jesus, had a crown of thorns. It only fits the accusation pitched against him. He called himself the King of the Jews. Here, we'll give you a crown of thorns. But of course, other criminals who were crucified did not have that. Other criminals that were crucified did not have a spear thrust into the side. And by the way, the spear imprint, as I mentioned about 3 weeks ago in the Passion Show, it matches a Roman pilum perfectly, the kind of spear that's used. The 127, you know, whip marks on the back, but it's not just that. It was a triple strand, which is the kind of whips that Romans used with bones and steel put into the ends of the whip. How in the world does a medieval forger know that? Did he have a whip handy with the bones and steel pellets still embedded in it and know the precise way in which the whip would strike the back and so forth and so on? My thought is, this resembles Rome, 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 right to the core, and it resembles Jesus uniquely right to the core. And so we've got very, very good evidence that of not only Jesus' resurrection, but Jesus' crucifixion in the precise, unique way that the gospel writers described it, which not only shows the validity of the shroud, but the validity of the gospel writers' accounts themselves. So the shroud gives very good validation of the gospels. So, I mean, I got carried away there, but there is a ton of evidence that the gospel writers were just spot on accurate. And we ought to take account of that, because the unique features actually validate the shroud. And of course, science validates the blood, validates the image formation, validates the anatomy of the image, etc. So this is really a remarkable relic, made for us really in the 21st century, to kind of take a look at.
I was going to ask you that.
If you have faith,
I was going to ask you that too, because in some ways you kind of have the, you know, kind of think of the people with the Bible code where they say, well, gee, because I have these computers now, I can figure out and read back into it. But in a sense, what you just pointed out is very true, which is because of the technology today that we have insights into it that those people never would have had if they were trying to make a forgery, or even those people who were appreciating it for what it actually was.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, come on. Who's going to put in pollen, fossils and pollen grains from indigenous to Jerusalem, indigenous to Edessa, and indigenous to Constantinople? You know, who's going to do this? Who's going to, find Roman artifacts and tools? Who's going to put Roman coins in the man's eyes with a special minting? Who's going to, are you kidding me? I mean, anybody who believes this is a forgery today, plus, Giulio Fanti did those other 3 tests, the Fourier transformed infrared spectroscopy, the Raman laser spectroscopy, and the tension compressibility and mechanical tension compressibility tests, all of which, mount up to show, along with Ray Rogers' vanillin testing, that the carbon dating was completely wrong. The linen dates back to 50 AD, probably plus or minus 100 years, with about 95% certitude. Okay. That's, come on. This is no forgery. I mean, this really goes back to the time of Jesus, to the time of Jerusalem, to the time of Jesus in Jerusalem, to the time of Jerusalem when Pontius Pilate was reigning. And of course, the crucifixion resembles the unique crucifixion of Jesus with real blood and real partial DNA profile. And the image can only be produced, it's a completely unique image. It can only be produced by an intense amount of light that lasts for a very short burst of time, resembling that can only be produced in a laboratory.
Well, it's interesting too.
ARF laser.
It's interesting too, Father, because you had perfect timing. We had some bursting lights in our studio while you had that elongated explanation, so it was actually perfect timing. So we're going to take a break. Much more ahead here with Father Spitzer. We're talking about the Shroud of Turin and the historicity of our Lord's resurrection. Stay with us.